Welcome back to the Delineation. My name is Cam White. This is the astrology show that is focusing on both mundane events as well as personal development. It's been a while since I've done a delineation, and one of my things for this new year is starting from here on out, you will be seeing weekly delineation episodes. I've gotten so many messages and comments and emails saying like, oh, you need to be doing the delineation more. I really enjoy it. And when I first started it, I only wanted to just do episodes on topics I wanted to talk about. However, I'm at a point now where I want to do this consistently. I want to do this weekly. And so here we are. And so we're starting off with this series. This series will kind of interchange with some other videos, or I should say some other episodes. But for the next couple of, weeks or months, I plan on doing a lot of episodes about the future. Major astrology transits, like one video I'm working really, really hard on, and I've done an immense amount of research on, is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. A lot of astrologers are talking about Pluto and Aquarius and Uranus and Gemini, and of course, those are really big deals too, and I will have episodes about that. But no one's talking about this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and there's so much going on. So you'll be seeing videos like that, a Uranus and Gemini episode, so on and so forth. And so, if you want to make sure you watch those episodes, make sure you subscribe as well. I haven't actually said anything about this, but if you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, please leave me a review. Please give me, 5 stars if you really enjoyed it. It actually really does help me out. And so this episode is going to be about my 2024 predictions. Now, when I say predictions, there's going to be kind of a nuance to it, because what this episode really is going into these major transits of 2024, and thanks to ChatGPT, research has become so much easier. Rather than spending hours and hours and hours looking up Wikipedia articles and trying to put things together, ChatGPT just makes this super easy to pinpoint specific events. And so anyway, we're going to be going over the major transits of 2024 and looking at, again, what are their meanings, what are the planets that are involved, what are the zodiac signs, and kind of coming up with our own predictions. Now, there's a few that I don't do the ChatGPT thing for, essentially because what is hard about astrological research is, not everything is like always super recorded. Like there could have been an event that, you're not going to find on a Wikipedia article, or it's going to necessarily be super easy to find. And there are a few that we're just going to kind of, that, with astrology too, it's like you'll see certain transits activate really literally, and you'll see other transits activate kind of like metaphorically. And so I don't know what the deal is with that with astrology. I think that's, again, where I wish more smart people would get into astrology and the dogma would come off of it so we could get actual money and funding into research on this, because clearly there's something going on. But anyway, so this episode is essentially, we're going to be going over the major transits and the history behind these transits and kind of going over our own predictions. And why I say our is I only know so much. Like, I'm only one person. I have a very incredibly intelligent audience. It's one of my favorite things about my platform, as I've cultivated a fucking sick audience, to be honest with you guys. And you guys also have a lot of insight. You guys also have a lot of knowledge that I don't have. And if I'm talking about something that you, or a specific time that, I didn't see anything about, but you may know, please leave a comment and let me know what you guys think your predictions are for some of these events. So, let's go ahead and get started with it. So this is going to be kind of like a keynote lecture style video. If you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple, I will make sure I read everything to you. But of course, the YouTube version will have some visuals, but it's mostly going to be like keynote slides. So 2024 predictions. The first major event that we're really going to be talking about is the Mars-Pluto in Aquarius conjunction. This is not, this is one of the transits that I didn't necessarily go into in terms of transits, because again, Mars has been conjoining Pluto in Capricorn for so long. And this is something that I think is really important in terms of like, we haven't seen something like this in a while. The last time Mars conjoined Pluto in Aquarius would have been like back after the American Revolution. And something that you'll see when it comes to doing astrological research is like, there's way more events that have happened in the past 50, 100 years than there were like 200 or 300 years that at least were documented. So the first thing is Pluto enters Aquarius on January 21st. We got a dip of Pluto in Aquarius from March to May of 2023. And Mars will not conjoin Pluto until February 13th. Now, there is a good and a bad side to Pluto in Aquarius. It's really easy to just like pinpoint the negative stuff because, I mean, it's Pluto at the end of the day. But I've talked to so many people who, like, when Pluto ingressed, it was more of like the relief of Pluto leaving Capricorn and not so much like, oh my God, Pluto going into a new zodiac sign. So I think there's some more on the personal development level, like exciting things about Pluto and Aquarius. But this is going to be mostly mundane and world events that we're going to be speaking about. So what are we looking at with Mars conjoining Pluto? Is number one, Pluto rules things like terror, fear, transformation, power, corruption. It's, did I do these on these slides? Yes, I did. Okay. We're going to talk about a little bit about the history of Pluto and Libra, which is really fascinating. And my bad, just the Pluto transits through the zodiac signs. So if Pluto rules things like terror, fear, transformation, power, corruption, Aquarius is going to rule things like society, technology, medicine. That's a big part of it. Crowds and people, ideas, social structures. This is really important because Saturn rules over Aquarius. Saturn does rule structures. And, when you talk about Aquarius, you're talking about groups of people. How do we structure society? How do we integrate, groups of people in? And it's an air sign. That's kind of one of the bigger things that you're going to see is, when Pluto was in Capricorn, it was about like the material because Capricorn's an earth sign. Like it's tangible. You can see it versus air. You can't really see it. It is everywhere. And that's going to kind of play in a little bit into some of the predictions that I have, but a lot of the air stuff is going to deal with things like, again, like ideas. Communication is a big part of it. Like, to kind of jump ahead real quick, I think a lot of Pluto and Aquarius will be one of my predictions for Pluto conjoining Mars. My bad. Mars conjoining Pluto and Aquarius is like some sort of cyber event, some sort of cyber warfare event happening. We'll talk about that, but I kind of wanted to go over some of the transits of past Pluto transits. Now, a lot of astrologers talk about Pluto in Capricorn, Pluto in Sag, and Pluto in Scorpio. Like those were easy, but I don't see too many talking about Pluto in Libra. And so I actually accidentally stumbled upon this. But when Pluto was in Libra, when it first ingressed, was the start of no-fault divorce. I actually heard about this from a guy. I don't know if you get some of you may know Gavin McInnes. Probably a lot of you don't like him, but I saw a clip of him talking about like, 80s kids, like Gen X's were, traumatized by divorce. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting for like Pluto and Libra. And I always had that in the back of my head like a couple years ago. And it wasn't until I discovered it was something about Ronald Reagan being the first governor to sign a bill that was no fault divorce. And I will try to remember this. In fact, I will type it out here to make sure I remember. I'm going to give you guys an article in the description about no fault divorce and what ended up happening after it, because it essentially made the terror around relationships. I mean, we also get this with the AIDS pandemic. I don't know if sometimes I struggle with what's a pandemic and an epidemic or whatever it is. But the problem with the AIDS thing was that it was Saturn conjoining Pluto and Libra in 1980, 1981. And the Saturn-Pluto conjunctions, that was, and it was also a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. That was the first of the air signs. We got the Saturn-Pluto-Jupiter conjunction in Libra. That was AIDS. We got the Saturn-Pluto-Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn into Aquarius. That was COVID. So you see some disease stuff like that. But it was this fear and terror around relationships, around other people. And when you started no-fault divorce, it ended up, again, I would really recommend reading this article. It's really, really good about how, marriage stats changed. I think like before the no-fault divorce, it was like divorces were only 20%, and then they went up to, 50%. And since then they've been in decline in terms of like divorce rates. But because, anyone can get divorced for any sort of reason, it made children's experiences growing up a lot worse. There's like a lot of studies that show like, kids that came from divorced families had all of these worse outcomes throughout the rest of their life. I'm a product of a divorce. I was a save the marriage baby. That was one of the like small things when I started getting into astrology. I read like a long time ago. It was like one of the first things was like, if you're a moon in Libra, you were like a save the marriage baby. And I was like, that's weird because my parents divorced literally immediately after I was born. But Pluto and Libra, we get no fault divorce. We get this terror and fear around relationships, which was a big deal at that time. Then we get Pluto and Scorpio, and this is the fear and terror around cults and kidnappers and Satanism and the occult, and like, oh, there's going to be people trying to pick you up and, try to offer you candy to, throw you in the car, and, the satanic panic stuff. Then we get into Pluto and Sagittarius, and we get terrorism. And we get fear around churches. This is also when like the pedophilia started. It's not when it started, but like the whole, I'm trying to censor myself a little bit so YouTube doesn't completely throw this under the bus, but like what churches were doing to kids, and again, fear of foreigners over extremist religion, that is a big part of terrorism. And, and you see that in 9/11 when we had the Saturn-Pluto opposition, Saturn ruling structures in Gemini, the sign of the twins, opposite Pluto, which is, again, like terror, fear, and the sign of Sagittarius, which is like religious extremism, or, again, foreigners, foreign people. So Pluto and Sagittarius, we have this terrorism and the global war on terror. Also, what's interesting about Pluto and Sagittarius is you get NAFTA, you get like, this is after the Soviet Union collapses, and this is when you really get, a globalism really kind of coming into the picture. And then, of course, you get Pluto and Capricorn. This was the start of the 2008 financial collapse. There's this fear around government systems, banking. There's all of this kind of, again, corruption. And, I've made this joke before on my channel, and some people like actually had a problem with it. But it's like Pluto's at 29 Capricorn. Every institution is corrupted. And like people got upset about that. And I didn't understand why. It's like, name me one institution that is not corrupted, And when I say institution, we're talking about governments, banks, churches, universities, the public education system. I always thought it was funny. I was just thinking about this last night. Like people that would, let's just say for sake of ease, like liberals are very like, we need to defend the public education system. But I just know so many people that never had a good time at public school. Like they never learned anything. And it was literally built to be like a cog in the factory. But we want to defend it. It's like the school is so corrupted and no one learns anything and it's all bad. So anyway, Pluto and Capricorn, we get the just full corruption and fear around, again, the banking system. We get the quantitative easing. We get the bailouts for everybody. That's Pluto and Capricorn. So that kind of gives us an idea of what Pluto might look like as it goes into Aquarius. Again, things ruling like societies, people, technology, medicine. So Mars, when we start talking about the Mars-Pluto conjunction, Mars is going to rule fights, conflicts, violence, separation, cutting, and inflammation. This is really important because Mars is not a minuscule in any way. Mars is going to be more conflict-oriented. And as we get to the Mars-Pluto conjunction in Aquarius, I think you'll see more of that. But why I think this is important to talk about is this 0-degree Aquarius thing. I have spoken about my astrological take on why I don't think the forced inoculations were a good idea. And and there's a lot of people that are still like, oh, well, I got it and I was fine. And there's a lot of people, I have a lot of clients that have very terrible negative health consequences of that. And the reason being was when the lockdown started, this was on March 31st, 2020. We had Mars conjoining Saturn at 0 Aquarius, right? 0 Aquarius. This degree comes up quite a bit. This was the lockdowns. This was the fear of people, separation from society by government mandate. Think Saturn is governments and structures. Mars is separation, cutting. It was in Aquarius. Literally separate yourself from society. Like you are on lockdown. You are on quarantine. People are scary. And later on in this episode, this is going to be a really long episode, by the way. I have like 115 slides. Mars-Saturn conjunctions coincide with disease outbreaks. And you get this one in Aquarius where the 0 Aquarius thing was really interesting. Now, coming back to the whole inoculation thing is the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And if you're not familiar with this, this is going to be a little bit long-winded. Jupiter conjoins Saturn every 20 years, but every 200 years, they conjoin in one element of the zodiac. So for the past 200 years, it's been in earth signs. We technically got our first one in an air sign in 1981 during the AIDS crisis, pandemic, whatever. Then we had our last Earth one in 2000, and then we had the first / like the beginning of the air triplicity shift, which was Jupiter Saturn conjoining at 0 Aquarius, and that day was December 19th. I think that actually might be the next thing on here. was when the Emergency Use Authorization Act for the inoculations was signed into law. And so we have this Mars-Saturn conjunction at 0 Aquarius. We have the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at 0 Aquarius. And we're going to have the Mars-Pluto conjunction at 0 Aquarius. And the difference between, again, Mars-Saturn is like, oh my God, lockdown. Like there's a pandemic, hide away. Jupiter conjoining Saturn and Aquarius. What I loved about Jupiter and Aquarius was Jupiter's like bringing the hope to the Aquarius. It was like, if we all just take it and if we all just, get locked down, everything will be fine. It's totally okay. They were like being like, get a donut for your, second, jab or whatever. It was very bringing a lot of hope to this. And this is, okay, this was the next thing. Yeah, Jupiter conjoined Saturn at 0 Aquarius, mRNA injection, EUA. And this was also kind of a prelude to January 6th. There's kind of a few things with that. That's kind of a whole nother episode I can make about. But we get Mars conjoining Pluto. Again, this is on February 13th. Riots, corrupted groups of people, terror around mass groups of people, cyber warfare, AI fear, and terror around medicine. Those are my main predictions. The reason why is, as Pluto goes into Aquarius, it's a two-way street. Pluto does bring power, right? And it is going to go into the sign of the people. So for me, I know sometimes I can come off as like a doomer. I have a lot of hope and faith into the future. However, it does not come because we ask nicely. But Mars conjoining Pluto sounds like a literal riot. Like, and again, whether you want to label it as a psyop or, it being intentional, or if it's just kind of a natural thing, that's kind of where I'm coming from. But Mars, conjoining Pluto, like corrupted groups of people. I mean, if you even look at the January 6th thing, whether you think that was an insurrection or not, like the main consensus is like, oh, these are bad people. And with Mars conjoining Pluto, I would imagine there being a scenario where that's elevated more. Like, oh, these people are doing bad things. Terror around mass groups of people. And this is kind of one of more of my, like, again, I would rather give you guys the context than rather say, like, this one thing is going to happen. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of a terror attack regarding a crowd of people. I just wouldn't be surprised about it. Throughout this episode, during the Mars-Saturn conjunctions, there was a few different transits that marked like mass shootings. And you never really actually, like from what I can tell, mass shootings in astrology, I haven't pinpointed the exact, like if there's a repeating transit that happens. But terror around mass groups of people, whether that's because of a bombing, or again, some sort of a mass shooting. The thing is, I would argue that if there is something like that, it's not a individual, but a group of people. That would be where I would be more paying attention to. Cyber warfare. I have just seen too many ex-military people and politicians talking about a blackout, some sort of a cyber attack. There being, again, some sort of terror and fear around things like the internet. And again, by the way, this is one of those things where they're going to do that no matter what, because at the end of the day, they want you on a central bank digital currency and they want you on a digital ID. And the only way they're going to do that is by causing fear around it, right? Like people, like you're not going to sign up for a digital ID just because it's like, oh, it's more convenient. They have to create a reason behind it. So that's another thing. The mass surveillance state, all that stuff that is always like, again, look at the Patriot Act. I think it was Alex Jones talking about this. Like the Patriot Act was kind of sitting on the table for a long time. And it took a terrorist event to be like, oh, by the way, we're now going to literally, read all your emails, your texts, listen into your phone calls, for the sake of terrorism. So with cyber warfare, I would imagine there's some sort of event that creates fear and panic around the internet and communicating with people globally through technology. And again, that being a tool to implement whatever they want to implement. AI fear, I go back and forth with this. There's a lot of varying opinions about if AI is going to be this like conscious living thing that takes over the world, or if it's just too dumb to do that, or it's like this vicious cycle, like the snake eating its own tail. So I go back and forth with that. I don't really know if I have too much of an opinion on AI on that. However, I just wouldn't be surprised if this is when people wake up, because this is the other thing. Like I've been talking about this for like the past 2, maybe 3 years now. like I have Uranus in Gemini, like I'm my bad, Uranus in Aquarius. Like I have this rebellious force inside of me against technology. And I think as Pluto goes into Aquarius, people might go like, oh, yeah, maybe technology can be weaponized. Maybe 5G and all of its research stating that it like causes cancer and is not good for your body may not be good to have a 5G pole every other block. I think you'll just see more, just how like Pluto and Capricorn kind of woke us up to the corruption between governments and banking. Pluto and Aquarius will kind of wake us up to the corruption around technology. And then terror around medicine. This is my own personal anecdote about, not my personal anecdote, but more so of like, I can't get over the zero Aquarius thing that keeps happening. And there's something inside of me that is like something like, why does that degree keep getting hit? What is happening there? I would think, and again, this is something that I'm totally okay with being wrong with. And if I'm wrong, you'll like let me know. And if I'm wrong, I will tell you that I was wrong. I have no problem about being wrong, but I would rather throw things out and take that risk than not saying anything and having in my head be like, oh, that happened. I just wouldn't be surprised if some sort of a study or some sort of data came out around the inoculations that told more of the truth around them not actually being effective and possibly being, not healthy for you, which is a light way of putting it. But there is something going on with medicine with Aquarius. You'll see that. So this gets to our next thing. Those are kind of my main predictions. This gets to our next thing. God, this is going to be a long video. We're 20 minutes in. I got like 115 slides. We get the Mercury, Saturn, Cazimi, and Pisces. For this next slide, I just remembered what I want to put. I don't know how much you guys have been paying attention to the Malaysian airline thing. Essentially, what I think the Mercury, Saturn, Cazimi, and Pisces thing is aliens. Now, I don't have a real set opinion on like, oh, there's aliens and the government's hiding it, or like, part of me is like, it's a psyop for Project Bluebeam and shit like that. But we saw this alien stuff break a lot more when Jupiter transited Pisces at the very beginning of 2022. And then starting in March of 2023, when Saturn went into Pisces, we see a lot more of this alien shit ramping up. I genuinely believe we will hear some sort of an event around aliens, because it's a Mercury Cazimi, so it's like, again, some sort of like information's being delivered, but it's in Pisces. It's like, wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. And my personal thing is it's actual secret military technology. Flight 370. So the missing Malaysian airline thing, which also happened when the sun was in Pisces, interestingly enough. I saw a video that Kim Iverson did. Kim Iverson is a journalist, and she had this guy on here who he has done a lot of research about, and there's been like videos coming out about that. There's a video that literally came out of that airplane disappearing, like from visual sight. And there was like a video of like these visual effects people like debunking it and that it was fake. But this guy comes back and debunks that they're debunking. Watching that video and listening to this guy and the fact that we have these video recordings, like, to me just says there is something really weird going on. There's something really weird. Again, we were figuring shit out in the 40s and 50s. And for whatever reason after that, like the whole like secret, government military science inventions that we've got going like has been laid low. I just wouldn't be surprised if we have some sort of shit like that could just disappear a plane and send it into a portal of something. I'm keeping more open mind about this. I don't know how much I believe in the aliens thing. I'm just skeptical. But I do think that this Flight 370 info is going to come out a little bit more. I do think that you will see more of this alien stuff coming out that I think is really important. So let's talk about the solar eclipse. This is the next one. So here's the deal with the solar eclipse in Aries. It's also the quote unquote great American eclipse. I don't know why we put great in it. And it's also a Mars-Saturn conjunction. So we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the eclipse. And the thing is with the eclipse, like there's so much history about like eclipses and events and stuff like that. So I'm not going to go too much in the eclipses, but just kind of like reiterate what I've already said about the nodes. Then we're going to go into Mars-Saturn conjunctions. And again, this happens on April 8th and on April 10th. And again, like I've said before, April is the most wild month of the year. I think this is when you're going to see a lot of the shit go down. But number one, the North Node is in Aries. We're talking about hunger, right? We're talking about drive, and it is literally in the sign of war. And the South Node is in Libra. This thing that is draining and exhausting that we're letting go of is in the sign of peace and diplomacy. I have been saying peace was never an option. That is like my MO for the nodes in Aries and Libra. I struggle to see it another way. There is a hunger for war, and Mars conjoined Saturn. Oh, whoops! I totally messed this up. Ignore this. Okay, we're back here. That was the slide that was supposed to be earlier. Anyway, Mercury was retrograde and still in detriment when I was making this, so leave me alone. There might be some spelling errors too, but that's just me. But a great example is the Israel-Palestine conflict. Days before a solar eclipse, in this on the South Node. Also, with Mars-Saturn conjunctions, we'll be talking a lot about Israel-Palestine. But as you can see now, it's all about war and destruction. You know, it doesn't matter if you're pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. I would think most people can agree that there is a hunger for more war and not trying to negotiate peace. There is a hunger for wanting to, again, completely end this conflict through annihilation of things like the Gaza Strip. I just think with this solar eclipse, this is something I forgot to put, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. This solar eclipse happens over America, over the Texas southern border. Now, I believe that there will be some sort of a border crisis. There already is a border crisis. People in Denver are waking up to it because they just shipped like 300 illegal immigrants here. And in fact, I actually talked to one, maybe for like 45 minutes. He was from Venezuela. The bus was free. He has like 2 weeks to stay at this, this was down the street from me, this hotel. And he was really nice. What I appreciate about at least this group of illegal immigrants, is that they are not just standing there for money. I mean, like all over Denver, it is like, let me wash your windows. And I appreciate that. Like I made a couple weekly horoscopes ago. I don't like helping out like the people that are like addicted, screaming at people. If you are willing to work and at least put some sort of effort in and like earn your dollar, I think that's something admirable and honorable. Sure, I don't agree with the flooding of illegal immigrants in here, and that there needs to be, something better installed. Like we need super hardcore, like, border. The border needs to be fixed. But this guy walked here for 3 months from Venezuela and then comes up here. He's finally up here, and at least he's, trying and not just like, begging on the streets. I genuinely appreciated that. So for those that think I'm just cold-hearted, I'm not. I gave him quite a bit of money to just wash my windows, and I chatted with him for 45 minutes just to get an idea. And so as this eclipse happens over the border, I can't help but think that this might get to a turning point. And I've talked about this. I talked about this on Gordon's channel, Gordon White. I'm going to have him on soon again. The reason that they want the border open, flooding with immigrants, and again, these are mostly males in military age, and there was like a senator, I think, that just talked about this in the House. They want to draft them. They want to make them a part of the military. Our military numbers are down. It's like 80% of Gen Zs aren't eligible for this. War is on the horizon. That is not going away anytime soon. And I will have a deep, deep, deep dive on why that is, astrology wise. Like there's really no other way around it. And so I kind of wonder how much we're putting the pieces together with a solar eclipse in Aries, where again, this is a new start, a new revelation for war, a new hunger and drive for war. It is over the southern Texas border. I've heard a lot of stories too about possibly the U.S. military getting involved with the cartels. I go back and forth with that of whether that's going to happen or not. It wouldn't surprise me because again, the American military wants to, like, they're in the business of war, so they want to start a new one. But we'll really see, I guess. But it is going over the border, and it is in the sign of war. It's just hard to not see those two pieces together, not including the Mars-Saturn conjunction. I've talked a lot about Saturn and Pisces being like permeable boundaries. And we've seen that. I mean, like Saturn's been in Pisces, the whole immigration crisis has just come up so much more. And even like people that are like left liberals are even being like, this is kind of a lot of fucking people, like, and nothing's really happening about it. Like people here in Denver are kind of waking up to like, oh, maybe Texas can't handle 3 million people coming over the border with the small amount of, funds that they get. So I see something happening over the Texas border. I think that's really important. This is something else that we'll talk about in the Saturn-Neptune episode. If there was going to be a state that does quote unquote secede, it would be Texas. And Texas would probably, besides California, would probably have the most, the biggest chance of success to be able to do that. But let's talk a little bit about these Mars-Saturn conjunctions, because the thing that I can't get over is that we have this solar eclipse in Aries ruled by Mars when Mars conjoins Saturn 2 days later. I think this is really, really important. I don't know how often you see something like this. While the North Node or one of the nodes is ruled by Aries and we get a Mars-Saturn conjunction at the same time. Like, that's ominous. So we're going to go a little bit into the history of Mars-Saturn conjunctions and then maybe make our own opinions about it. So these also, the dates of this might be a little bit back and forth, but I'm going to do my best. War examples. We get the Ukraine conflict of April of 2022. This is the full scale after invasion in February. Now, the invasion actually coincided with a Venus stationing direct and leaving shadow. Venus being retrograde was when, Putin was putting soldiers on the border. And then after Venus literally left shadow, which is another reason why I think we'll see more war in 2025, is when Venus leaves shadow in Aries. And then Saturn and Neptune enter Aries. I think we'll see that. But what you really got in April of 2022 was like, again, this was the full scale war. This was like, all right, now we did sanctions, but it's like, now we're sending in, money. Now we'll have the whole world rallying around this. We get another Israel-Palestine conflict in August of 2014. This was the Mars-Saturn conjunction in Scorpio. This was some sort of a hot, situation. And again, that's what's kind of, my bingo card wasn't on Israel-Palestine because that conflict just comes up all of the time. So it's hard to be like, I didn't predict that with Venus stationing. Venus was just, oh, by the way, when, Hamas attacked Israel, that was literally the day Venus left shadow. Like literally the day Venus left shadow. Venus, there's something called, I think it was the Pawnee. The Pawnee tribe was one of the last American Indian tribes that did human sacrifices, and it was called the Morning Star ritual or something like that. It was essentially like right as Venus became the Morning Star, stationed direct after a retrograde, there would be like a child that had like a vision and a dream. He'd go to the medicine man and, kind of confirm it. And what they would do is like, they'd go to a neighboring tribe, like steal the princess and then like hang her on like this, not like a cross, but they would like tie her hands and legs to like a rope. And then they all like ceremoniously like shoot arrows at her and kill her. It was really weird. But I thought that was really interesting with Venus stationing direct. Venus also in a lot of like, like older text refers to like Satan. Venus retrograde cycles deal a lot with war too. That's a whole nother thing. But we get this Israel-Palestine conflict, August of 2014. That was Mars, Saturn, and Scorpio. We also get the Sinjar massacre of August of 2014. This is when ISIS attacked the I'm going to botch this, the Yazidi in Iraq, leading to another massacre. That was Mars, Saturn, and Scorpio. In 2016, this was Mars, Saturn, and Sagittarius. Now, what was interesting about this is if you remember, Mars ingressed into Sagittarius, I believe around early spring, late winter of 2016. And before it conjoined Saturn, it stationed retrograde. And it retrograded in Sagittarius and Scorpio. It stationed direct and then moved forward. And then it conjoined Saturn by August of 2016. We had North Korea conducted a series of missile tests in August of 2016, raising tensions in the region. And what you're going to see is as we go along, these Mars-Saturn conjunctions, as well as I think it was the Mars-Jupiter conjunctions, deal a lot with North Korea doing missile tests. Like that's something I keep seeing coming back up. Now, why I think that's interesting is the other day is I saw a post that said, Kim Jong-un is being like, yeah, war is inevitable. And something I'm going to talk about in the Saturn-Neptune episode I'm going to do is the Korean War ended the day, like literally the day Saturn conjoined Neptune in Libra. That was in Libra, the sign of peace. We get a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in the sign of Aries, of war. And part of me has kind of thought like, oh, that war won't come back up again. But like, given everything that's going on, I wouldn't be surprised if the Saturn-Neptune conjunction would like launch the whole North Korea thing. But we see this. We see the Mars-Saturn conjunction going on. More war examples. We have the Ukraine crisis. This is the conflict in the eastern Ukraine between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian separatists, continued throughout August of 2014. This was a big deal in 2014. If you don't know, the war in Ukraine started in 2014 when the American government, backed by the CIA, paid money for the Nazis to overthrow a coup, and then they started killing a bunch of people in the eastern region, and that's what this whole war is about. It is not because Putin wants to take over, the land that was the USSR. That is all propaganda. But anyone who's been paying attention to history and actually knows history would know this. And if you don't think that, then it's because you have only been paying attention to the news since February of 2022. But this was ongoing in 2014. We also get August of 2010. These Mars-Saturn conjunctions have really been coinciding with 2010. August for a long time. And I do actually go, again, like it's a little bit back and forth of the dates here. So we get the Iraq withdrawal. And I believe in 2010, this was the Mars-Saturn conjunction in Libra. Again, so this was exalted Saturn, fallen Mars, or detriment Mars. So the United States formally ended its combat mission in Iraq on August 31st, 2010. This was during a Mars-Saturn conjunction in Libra, transitioning to a more limited role in support of Iraqi security forces. I thought this was interesting because with Mars-Saturn conjunctions, we see a little bit more of the war stuff going on, but this was like an ending of a war. So there is a little bit of hope there, but my thing is that was Saturn exalted in Libra and Mars in detriment in Libra. Like Mars, the planet of fighting and combat, was in detriment, but Saturn, the planet of government, even things like security and diplomacy being exalted. So there was this kind of like end of that war. So one of my things is Mars Saturn conjoining in Pisces is, I do think, more war stuff. We're going to get to this disease part in just a second, but where I really see it coming from, I'm still holding my breath for China, Taiwan. In my honest opinion, I think that's going to be something that you see between like spring and summer of 2025. I don't know if that would happen now. There's currently a lot of hotbeds for war at the moment. And so, the Mars Saturn thing too is also in both a water sign and a Jupiter ruled sign. So it involving some sort of a water terrain, or it involving some sort of a, again, if Pisces has been this alien thing coming on, part of me wonders how much of the alien shit comes up during the Mars Saturn conjunction. But I just wouldn't be surprised if there was more. And again, those examples that we used were just Mars Saturn conjunctions. They weren't necessarily eclipses in the sign of war either. And so this is where I think I lean a little bit more towards you will probably see more war kick off. I doubt Israel and Hamas or Palestine stops. I think what you would see is an escalation more with the Houthis and the Yemenis doing the whole Red Sea thing that they've got going on. That will eventually bring Hezbollah into the game and Iran. And again, the whole point of this war is Israel wants the U.S. taxpayer and our bodies to go and destroy Israel. That's what the neocons want. They've wanted that for forever. Again, one of the last Saturn-Neptune conjunctions that we got in 1953 in Libra was when the CIA backed over a coup to install the Shah in Iran. And that was pretty much what led to the Iranian Revolution, was that event. So there's just kind of again, the issue with even calling out which one is Venezuela wants to invade Guyana. We're looking at like Sudan still in the middle of like some, crisis. There's been a lot of talk over the past year of America getting involved in Haiti. There's been, again, where Russia, Ukraine goes is a whole nother story. There's just all of these different hotbeds for war. Let's talk about disease. This is something that we see a lot of with Mars-Saturn conjunction. So again, we had that Mars-Saturn in Aquarius conjunction, March of 2020. We got COVID. And then also we had another Mars-Saturn in Aquarius conjunction in 2022. This is the China lockdown. This is, again, COVID, but I remember specifically I was expecting more lockdowns, but what actually ended up happening was China went into another full-blown lockdown in April of 2022. This was like their last and final one. And my thing is with also with the 2022 one was it was like every 5 minutes a new variant of COVID was coming out. So it's kind of like, that was all over the news, trying to be like, oh, this new disease happened. I think it was mostly just COVID stuff. And the whole following the variants thing got really tiring. Mars, Saturn in Scorpio. We got Ebola. That was happening in August 2014. I think, if I'm not mistaken, I have my Chat GPT up. I have so many Chat GPT things going on. Where was it? Mars, Saturn events. Here we go. I think in August of 20. Oh no, I didn't read this on Chat GPT. I looked this up, and I believe in August of 2014 was when Ebola like first came to the U.S. and that's when that kind of happened. I think. I'll have to double check that. Mars, Saturn, and Sag. I think like Ebola really technically started in 2013, but then there was more of a panic about it in that summer. I mean, that's the same thing with COVID. COVID really started. They reported on it in December of 2019, but there's a lot of info that's like it probably started in like September of 2019. And then it wasn't until March, again, like almost 6 months later, that it actually ended up coming into town. Mars, Saturn, and Sagittarius, we get the Zika virus, August of 2016. Mars, Saturn, and Libra, we get August of 2012. We get West Nile virus outbreak. We get Mars, Saturn, and Libra in August of 2010. We get a cholera outbreak in Haiti. We see this kind of, again, repeat. And we can go even deeper into that, but I just wanted to use like the most recent times. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a disease outbreak. Here's my issue. If you have watched me for any length of time, most people have probably seen like, yeah, I didn't really subscribe to a lot of the panic that COVID was. Here's what I will say. In the Bible, and whether you agree with the Bible or not is not what's important. Like I'm not on my Jesus shit at this moment. But in the Bible, and like I think it's Revelations, it talks about like the first disease will not be a big deal, but the second disease will be. And I've been thinking a lot about that. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to think of it, to be honest with you. It's one of those things that makes me go like, this first disease, COVID, was not all that bad. Comparatively speaking to like something like Ebola. So my problem is I don't know, like I know for 2025, just like the World Economic Forum and all these other big, globalist people, they laid out an agenda for what a pandemic would look like in like 2019. There was a lot of pre-planned things about COVID. Like whether you want to think that it was accidental, they had plans installed just before it happened to go along with something like that. It's really crazy when you get into it. And so I know they have something like that planned for 2025. So again, some sort of another pandemic. I watched a whole video on it. I forgot what it was about. Like what kind of, disease it was. But I always thought like after I heard about that in the Bible of like, oh, the first one's not a big deal, but the second one is, makes me like for me, like I was very like anti-mask and anti-inoculation. And part of me wonders like how much all of those COVID policies that everyone hated now ends up not working out for us in the end. Not that I think we should go into lockdowns. I just don't think the government should do that. But like our general being like, oh, whatever the disease that they say it is isn't as big of a deal as they say it is, and it ends up being that big of a deal. That's just where my thoughts are. Maybe it is just another psyop. Maybe it is just another scam. Who knows? But I've been thinking about that. That's just my own 2 cents. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of a disease. It isn't, again, it's in Pisces. I wouldn't be surprised if it was water related. Again, in Aquarius, we had like this virus that was in the air and, you just had to like separate yourself from society and put on a mask because you don't know where it's at. I just wouldn't be surprised if it was related to water. We get to planes. This was something that I wasn't expecting to stumble upon, but this kind of brings me back to the Malaysian air flight thing. The one that disappeared is there's a lot of plane crashes that happen with Mars Saturn conjunctions. This was March 2018. This was Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302, Boeing 737 MAX by Ethiopian Airlines crashed shortly after takeoff, resulting in the deaths of all 157 people on board. The incident raised concerns about the safety of the Boeing 737 MAX series. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Boeing put like all of their money and investment into this plane, and it had this automatic system, I believe, where it was like elevation and pitch or yaw or something like that, like automatically like turned on, and you couldn't turn it off to where like people would essentially just fucking crash. I watched a documentary on that. That was really interesting. But that was a really, really big deal because Boeing essentially put all of their money into this plane and it ended up being like a disaster. February 2018. So in 2018, around February and March, we had a Mars-Saturn conjunction in Capricorn. Saratov Airlines Flight 703, the Antov AN-148 crashed shortly after takeoff from Moscow's, I'm going to botch this, Domodedov Domodedovo International Airport, killing all 71 people on board. March of 2018, U.S. Bangla Airlines Flight 211. Again, March 2018, Mars-Saturn conjunction. The Bombardier Dash 8Q400 crashed while attempting to land at Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu, Nepal. There were fatalities among the 71 people on board. We get to August of 2016. Emirates, whoops, sometimes when I do the copy and paste, it's not there. Emirates Flight 521, the Boeing 777 crash landed at Dubai International Airport. All passengers and crew survived, but a firefighter died in the response. Interesting. There was also, I just saw this thing in Japan, like they just had a bunch of earthquakes, but they had a plane come down and like catch on fire and stuff, and everyone lived. But again, we're looking at April 10th of 2024, not January. During the Ukraine crisis, the conflict in eastern Ukraine between Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian separatists continued throughout August 2014. The downing of Malaysian Airlines flight MH17 in July further heightened tensions in the region. I forgot if it was Russia or Ukraine. Essentially, there was a Malaysian airliner going over, and someone shot it and bombed it. I believe everyone died on that. Malaysia does not have good luck with planes, which is interesting to me. But that was a big deal. This is July 23rd, 2014. Again, during the Mars-Saturn conjunction in Scorpio? Yeah, Scorpio. TransAsia Airways Flight 222, the ATR 72 crashed during a go-around in bad weather near Megong, Penghu, Taiwan, resulting in 48 fatalities. July of 2010, Airblue Flight 202, the Airbus A321 crashed in the Margala Hills near Islamabad, Pakistan, killing all 152 people on board. Now, am I saying every Mars, like, plane crashes only happen with Mars-Saturn conjunctions? No. But when I was looking up major events that happened in, these time frames, every single time was a plane crash, like a notable plane crash. And like, I've done enough research with this stuff, like, in my Saturn and Pisces video and, Jupiter and Taurus video and all these other things. It's like, you'll see these similarities and you don't really see often plane crashes, but goddamn, every time there's a Mars-Saturn conjunction, there's a more newsworthy plane crash that I think is interesting. We go even further. Anan Airlines Flight 8387, August 24th, 2010, the Embraer E190 crashed at Yichun I'm botching all of these words, by the way. Please forgive me. Yichun Lindu Airport in China. While there were fatalities, some passengers survived the crash. A lot of plane crashes. And again, what was interesting about all of those was that it wasn't just like one for Mars-Saturn. It was like multiple big airplane crashes during these Mars-Saturn conjunctions. I find that interesting. And it wasn't on my bingo card, but like, I just wouldn't be surprised if we saw a notable plane crash. And again, this is also again in Pisces, where part of me is wondering how much of this Malaysian airline thing gets brought back up again. And I will link that Kim Iverson. There's actually 2 Kim Iverson videos I want to link to you guys, because the new information that coming about the missing Malaysian flight is really compelling. Like it's a lot to take in. Trust me, I did my wormhole, my research on that years ago in terms of like, they probably lost cabin pressure and then they just drifted, but they never ended up finding parts, or they found some parts all the way in like Madagascar. But there's literally videos of this plane disappearing that can't really be redone. And the fact that there's videos about it is also telling. It's like, why were they watching that plane? Anyway, I'll link the videos. I want you guys to watch those. So let's talk about Jupiter conjoining Uranus. This is happening on 4/20, easy day to remember. This, in my opinion, is the most exciting transit of the year. What's really interesting is that it happens 10 days after the worst transits of the year. So that's kind of a hard read as well. Now, let me see. I'll just talk about this first. The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, in my opinion, in Taurus, I've also just seen a lot of talk. I've seen a lot of talk about 2 things from like ex-military people and politicians and stuff like that, and like even like people like Ray Dalio. I think in 2024, 2 of the biggest notable events that like if things were really going to like hit the fan, the 2 big things would be like some sort of cyber attack and some sort of bank crisis. Now, when you talk about a banking crisis, if you pay attention to the economics, there's a lot of things going on that could possibly happen. But I just wouldn't be surprised if there was some sort of a shakeup in the banking system that fucked things over. Because again, that is how they get everyone on the CBDC. That is not something that's up for debate. That is something that they are going to do. In fact, what I want you guys to do too is after you're done watching this, I want you to watch this video by S.J. Anderson. And you guys should know who S.J. Anderson is by now. He's like another amazing astrologer. He did a video, really quick video, I loved it, about Uranus and Gemini and new banking systems and new banks coming online like since like 16 something like that, 1600 something. The CBDC is happening. That's not up for debate. I think people are just now waking up to that. And also, by the way, it's like complete fascism. Because again, it'll just be like a digital currency until the infrastructure of the CBDC is set up to where, as it continues to be rolled out and used, it will be used more and more greatly for totalitarian, authoritarian control over what you do. Like, oh, you're not allowed to buy, you know, your groceries because you haven't, you know, worked out enough and you haven't done this. Also, you know, you hang around these people a lot because we could trace you through your, you know, through the Wi-Fi, through your phone. And these people are not, you know, pro our sentiment. And so we're going to lock your money. So you can't, until you stop hanging out with these people. You've bought in 20 gallons of gas this month. That's your limit for the month. You've overdone your limit of 6 ounces of red meat for the month. So you can't buy red meat. You can't buy red meat until you buy more vegetables. Until you buy more of our GMO products, that sort of a thing. Like there's a lot of control, and that is the whole point of the CBDC. Even big banking institutions question, why do we need it? It doesn't do anything. Like what we have is already good enough, but that's not the point. It's for totalitarian fascist control, essentially. Again, this is something Jimmy Dore talks a lot about. Like if you think Trump getting elected is like fascism's coming in, it's like, where have you been? We're in the fascist state. It's all the same thing. So Jupiter, Uranus. The reason I think that we will see more of banking and money things, and there's a few other things we're going to talk about, because number one, Jupiter rules things like expansion, increase, prosperity, abundance, wealth, faith, hope, insight, and belief. Jupiter is an awesome planet. We like Jupiter, and I'm going to go over some of the history of Jupiter in conjoining Uranus, and they're typically good things. My thing is it's kind of, again, the difference I think right now is, one, we're in a triplicity shift. So everything in the past was during the Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions in Capricorn. That is the long-term transit that we're seeing. Now that we're in the air triplicity shift with Pluto ingressing into Aquarius and Uranus going into Gemini, we're seeing a macrocosmic like shift in how humanity does things. So I don't necessarily look at it as like all good. Like I do think Jupiter, and I have a couple reasons for that, but on paper, and again, I think in most people's personal life, Jupiter Uranus will be really sick. It's like, again, my favorite transit of the year. But we get Uranus, which rules innovation, technology, freedom, rebellion, instability, and it's explosive. So there's kind of like this, like Jupiter is kind of like, you know, already doing a lot. It's already big and explosive and gassy, and it conjoins Uranus, which is also explosive. And I want to go over a little bit of the history for that. Now, I will say for Jupiter Uranus, when I was doing my research about this, it's very zodiac sign dependent. It's very zodiac sign dependent. Like with the Mars Saturn conjunctions, it's like, oh yeah, disease and war. What you see with Jupiter Uranus is that it's very descriptive of the zodiac sign. I mean, starting with deep water horizon. This was the big oil spill, April of 2010. Although the incident began in late April, its effects continued to unfold through May and June. That's when we had the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Aries. The Deepwater Horizon oil rig explosion resulted in a massive oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. Let's see. Did I talk about this at all? No. Okay, so the other thing, I meant to actually put this on here. One of the other things that we had with Jupiter Uranus was the Fukushima incident, where there was that earthquake and that nuclear meltdown. That also happened with Jupiter conjoining Uranus. And this was in Aries, right? Explosive. Now, the next thing that we get, and this is something we're going to talk about with Jupiter and Gemini, and there's a lot of stuff I'm going to talk about, but we had the WikiLeaks Cablegate. This was November of 2010. So in 2010, Jupiter conjoined Uranus in Aries. They both stationed retrograde and then moved back into Pisces and conjoined again. So this was the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Pisces in November of 2010. And this is kind of what ChatGPT, I was asking about money and energy. The release of classified diplomatic cables by WikiLeaks in November of 2010 had significant global political and diplomatic implications. What we see with Jupiter is about like truth. And like Jupiter conjoining Uranus is like, oh, here's the truth. Here's this situation. And right now, I mean, we're still going through all this stuff right now with the WikiLeaks Cablegate was related to Julian Assange. And he's going, I think, on trial right now. I think he's supposed to be like extradited to the US, something like that. I think we're going to see a lot about Edward Snowden and Julian Assange, possibly in 2024, but definitely before Jupiter leaves Gemini. And I have reasons for that. So we get to 2010. And again, if Jupiter is about like revelation and like, again, truth and belief and faith, and Uranus is about tech, something else that we see is the discovery of the Stuxnet worm. The Stuxnet computer worm was a sophisticated piece of malware designed to target industrial systems. Was discovered in June of 2010. It was later revealed to be a cyber weapon, specifically targeting Iran's nuclear facilities. I, like, maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, just got done watching a whole, like, mini, like, video essay about this. And I had no idea about this. I mean, like, this was big. I mean, they pretty much got into Iran's nuclear facilities through, like, a printer. And it was there for a long time. It was there for a long, and all it did was just slowly erode the nuclear facilities to where, like, over 5 years they would end up failing. This was interesting. And again, with Jupiter, this being like Jupiter, Uranus, and Aries is like, again, like sabotage of like war, like some sort of tech that like, you know, again, related to like war, like some sort of, I mean, you could argue this would have been good. We don't want Iran to have nuclear, you know, capabilities. At the end of the day, even if you're America, China, Russia, we shouldn't have nuclear stuff either, but we don't want Iran doing it either. I just found that interesting for Aries. Also in 2010, CERN Large Hadron Collider, Hadron, I thought it was Hadron. December of 2010, this was Jupiter, both in Aries and Pisces. CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, announced the first successful collision at higher energies in the Large Hadron Collider. This contributed to ongoing experiences in particle physics. So, like, Hadron Collider, they're just smashing Hadron. I thought it was Hadron. This is fucking me up right now. But anyway, that was a really big deal. CERN has been a really big deal, and I thought that was really interesting for both Jupiter in Pisces, but also Aries too, just like smashing particles together. This is where it gets really crazy. So in 1997, February of 1997, we had a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Aquarius. This one's really sticking out to me. So we had Deep Blue versus Garry Kasparov. In the realm of breakthroughs and discoveries, IBM's Deep Blue, a chess-playing computer, defeated world chess champion Garry Kasparov in a highly publicized match. While this event is not directly related to money and energy, again, my bad, that was ChatGPT thing, it marked a significant moment in the development of artificial intelligence and computing capabilities. You got to think. Jupiter, and again, expansion, hope, faith, belief, opportunity, and Uranus, technology in the sign of Aquarius, like computing science. And this was something like a computer beat a human. And I think at this time there was more like hope around what the future of all of this stuff looks like. But this was really interesting to me. This is where, oh, wait, there's also this too. There's another one that's really crazy. Introduction of the Palm Pilot in February 1997. The first Palm Pilot, a personal digital assistant, was introduced. The device became popular for its compact size and functionality, contributing to the widespread adoption of PDAs. Again, this is kind of like a preliminary thing to the smartphone. Again, tech in your hand, personal digital assistant, more, tech stuff. There's a lot of stuff that we'll talk about this with Saturn and Neptune also. NASA's Pathfinder mission, February 1997, the Sojourner rover successfully landed on Mars as a part of NASA's Pathfinder mission. This event marked a significant milestone in space exploration and the use of robotics for planetary exploration. If I'm not mistaken, this was the first rover to land on Mars. And we see this like otherworldly stuff. Like, for example, Elon Musk in his chart has Mars, Rahu, and Aquarius. He's like, I will colonize Mars. I will go to this other land. Like Aquarius is super colonization and shit like that. But the fact that we had this Jupiter Uranus thing in Aquarius, like, and we got to Mars, I thought was really interesting in terms of tech related to like other worlds. And I just thought that was an interesting connection with, again, Elon Musk's Mars, Rahu, and Aquarius. Like that gives, like, I think, like, again, most people know, like, I'm not a big fan of Elon Musk, but I do genuinely believe his sentiment of like getting people on Mars. That seems like a mission bigger than him. This is where I think Jupiter, Uranus, and Aquarius got crazy. Human cloning announcement. February 1997. In February 97, the announcement of the successful cloning of a sheep named Dolly captured global attention. While this event is more related to genetics and biotechnology, it had implications for healthcare and sparked ethical discussions about the potential cloning of humans. Jupiter, Uranus, and Aquarius, like cloning began. We literally figured out how to clone a sheep. Now, how that again, and the reason why the Aquarius transits from the past are so important is that's going to give us ideas of what it looks like in the future. And so this is Jupiter, Uranus, and Aquarius in 97. There was like a lot more like, oh, technology's cool. You know, the internet's kind of coming online. Look at all these new things that we could do. And I think again with Pluto and Aquarius, we're going to be like, oh my God, technology's scary and bad. But I thought the human cloning part of Jupiter, and again, it wasn't a human clone, but it was a sheep. And the fact that, which sheep is also very Aquarius, like, again, like people call like, you know, people that just follow a crowd like sheeple. I thought that was kind of interesting. Again, just technology around, you know, medicine and society and the implications of that. I thought that was really interesting. We get to 1983. This was Jupiter, Uranus, and Sagittarius. We get Microsoft introduces Windows 1. So Windows. While slightly beyond September 1983, Microsoft launches Windows 1 in November 1983. This marked the beginning of the Windows operating system, which would later become a dominant force in the personal computing industry. This is in Sagittarius. So with Sagittarius, you do things, you get like kind of technology. But I thought it was interesting for like an interface and again, more kind of technology bigger thing. Like one of my personal predictions with Jupiter, Uranus, actually save that for later because I do have a slide on that. I just couldn't remember if I had a slide on that. Another thing we have the development of the compact disc. This was again during the Jupiter Uranus in Sagittarius, revolutionizing the music industry. The CD offered a breakthrough in digital audio storage and playback technology. This was another one I thought was really crazy. I didn't know about this. The Soviet nuclear false alarm. I actually have heard of this. I just didn't realize this was on a Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Sag, and this was like the day it happened. On September 26, 1983, the Soviet Union's early warning system detected the launch of several U.S. intercontinental ballistic missiles. However, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, a Soviet officer, correctly assessed it as a false alarm, preventing a potential catastrophic nuclear response. This was a big deal. This guy saved the world, essentially. But this was on the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Like oh my God, this is going to happen. What are we going to do? Oh my God, like Jupiter-Uranus is again like an explosive, like destabilizing event. I like that this was in Sagittarius with Jupiter, and there was kind of like, no, it's a false alarm. Like I have faith that this isn't the real deal. This was another Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in September of 1983, and this kind of comes back to the flight thing. Korean Air Flights 007 shoot down September of 1983. On September 1st, 1983, Korean Air Flight 007 was shot down by a Soviet interceptor after it strayed into Soviet airspace. All 269 passengers and crew member on board were killed, leading to increased tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. So that's also interesting. We get the shoot down of a plane that caused more tensions, and then we get the whole false nuclear thing. This is what I also thought was interesting was ARPANET transition to TCP/IP. For the tech nerds, I want you guys to explain what this means because I'm not one of those people. But January 1983, the ARPANET, the precursor to the modern internet, officially transitioned to using the TCP/IP protocol on January 1st, 1983. This marked a crucial step in the evolution of the internet and laid the foundation for its future growth. There's a lot of internet stuff with Saturn Neptune, by the way. There's so much, like, I'm so excited for the Saturn Neptune. In fact, it might even be like 2 or 3 episodes because there's so much shit I've got about Saturn Neptune that is just wild. But I thought this was interesting, again, in terms of tech stuff, laying down the foundations for the internet. Apple comes up a lot in this, both Jupiter, Uranus, but Jupiter and Gemini. The Apple Lisa release, Apple releases the Lisa computer in January 1983. It was one of the first personal computers to feature a graphical user interface and introduce advanced features for its time, although it faced challenges in the market. So this is kind of coming back to the Windows thing. Like Windows was like this interface with technology, and the Apple Lisa, like, again, also advanced features in terms of like a graphical user interface. Like I just thought these are really interesting, connections during this Jupiter, Uranus, and Gemini. Which again, Sagittarius is the blend of like the human and the animal, and like with the tool. It's like it's against the centaur with the bow and arrow. It's like blending our bodies with and morphing them with tools. It reminds me of like ergonomics. We come back to Jupiter, Libra, Jupiter conjoining Uranus in Libra. I know this is a long episode, guys. Bear with me. We're not almost done. We have a lot more to go. But there's just a lot of shit coming up in 2024. And again, these Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions, the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction has me the most excited, and I think there's the most going on here. But we get to Apollo 8 mission, December 1968, launched on December 21st, 1968. Apollo 8 was the first crewed spacecraft to orbit the moon. This is what's interesting is this was in Libra, and we get people out in space. That was not the first time we had a person, but like orbiting something like the moon. And again, like the moon, of course, rules Cancer, but just like, I don't know, like the relational thing is interesting. The mission included the iconic Earthrise photograph, and the crew's live broadcast from lunar orbit on Christmas Eve captured global attention. This was a pivotal step towards the Apollo 11 mission, which successfully landed humans on the moon in July 1969. So again, Jupiter, Uranus, again, some sort of innovation, a breakthrough with technology. The other thing is we get the Woodstock Festival, August of 1969. The actual conjunction was about July of 1969. I believe, sorry, I did a lot of research. I'm starting to forget things. The Woodstock Festival in August 1969 became an iconic event in music history, reflecting the counterculture and social movements at the time. You got to think Jupiter, Uranus in Libra. Like this was kind of like, again, the social revolution is or counterculture and social movements is kind of interesting for Jupiter, Uranus in Libra in terms of like, again, shaking things up with relationships. This was also like in 1969 was when no fault divorce came online, and then it was like when Pluto entered Libra in like the very early 70s is when like the nation ended up doing the no fault divorce. But you see a lot of relationship stuff happening here. Also, June of 1969, AT&T announces picture phone service. AT&T introduced commercial picture phone service on June 30th, 1969, offering video calling capabilities. It was a technological innovation of the time. Jupiter, Uranus in like Libra, like you can see someone else when you contact them. Like I thought that was really, really interesting. So we get to Jupiter, Uranus in Taurus. Where are my predictions? Food. Something's going on with food. Now there's a lot of talk, like, if you're like me and you've been into the kind of healthy, natural way of doing things over the past few years, I think, you've seen like lab grown meat. I think you've seen the fake meat shit with Uranus and Taurus. Part of me is really curious about how Jupiter conjoining Uranus is going to do with food, like food innovations. Is this like just cloning cows for more meat? Is this, lab grown meat is now in grocery stores? I do look at it for wealth as well. Like, again, like some of my more predictions is like Jupiter Uranus is going to do something with food. It's Taurus. It's something to do with food. It's the bull. The thing, like, again, the bull, the cow. Wealth. Now, I said this a long time ago, and I stopped paying attention to Bitcoin probably in 2022. But like, if you've watched me for any of that amount of time, like I said, Jupiter and Taurus will be like a bull market for Bitcoin. It's got literally Taurus in the 10th house, day chart, Jupiter going through it. Super awesome and great. Jupiter conjoining Uranus and Taurus, I think, will be a big shakeup with Bitcoin. Part of me wonders, is that something because of a rollout of a CBDC? Like, I genuinely think, like, it's not like, Jupiter conjoins Uranus and all of a sudden our money switches over to CBDCs. That's going to take 2 to 3 years. But I do think we will see the beginning of the CBDC with Jupiter conjoining Uranus and Taurus, because it is going to shake up, global money markets. Value. That's the other thing. Like, Gemini, and this is what I liked about SJ's video, is like Mercury is more of the ruler of currency because it's all made up at the end of the day. It's a way of trading and bartering, much more Gemini. But Taurus is going to rule like inherent value. So what gets shooken up in like, again, like assets, even things like wealth and things like land. Oil, you see a lot of oil stuff with Taurus as well, just on the Taurus Scorpio axis. Things like fertilizer, things like nitrogen. I think you'll see a lot more of a shakeup in the oil market. Materials, again, we're talking about like tangible things here. So it's kind of like what innovations around tangible goods will happen. And the other thing is sex. I don't know. Put a question mark there because it's like, well, Taurus is it's not just, it's like Venus is really the ruler of sex. That's going to be both Libra and Taurus. I don't know. I just put that there to be like, I would kind of keep my eye on that. But those are kind of just my predictions kind of going back. And I'm really focusing on food and wealth in terms of shakeups, innovations, breakthroughs. That will be a big deal. I guess I did this. Food, meat development, that's definitely happening. CBDC beta rollout. And some sort of a banking crisis. I think if a banking crisis was going to happen, it's either going to be during Mars, Pluto, and Aquarius during the whole cyber attack, or the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. Those are just my predictions, what I personally think. And again, maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but I'd rather just kind of talk about it and look at it. Let's talk about Jupiter and Gemini. I've got a lot of Jupiter and Gemini stuff for you guys. What's interesting about Jupiter and Gemini is that we get money stuff with Gemini. And again, this is why I want you guys to watch the S.J. Anderson clip. And I actually wrote all these things down. I'm going to link them in the description, so make sure you watch them, but make sure you come back to this. Gemini and Mercury has much more to do with currency and exchanges of trade, mediums of trade. Mercury rules commerce. So some of the things that we had with Jupiter and Gemini is the Eurozone crisis. The Eurozone crisis continued to unfold in 2012 with concerns over the sovereign debt of several European countries. This is another thing that people are talking about with inflation and the rising of interest rates is the sovereign debt crisis. Like every country's debt is denominated in dollars. So like we're paying, I think it's like $700 billion like a year on just our interest on our $36 trillion debt. Like, and I think 700 billion is like the amount that like they just get in tax revenue. So we're not even paying off the principal, but just the interest is like $700 billion or something like that. So the America can afford it because we just print out all the money, but all the other countries just can't print US dollars. So there is some sort of a sovereign debt crisis that is sort of brewing. The problem is like I paid a lot of attention to economics. I could still sit here and say I don't know shit about it enough, but I know enough that there's like the reverse repo, there's the again the sovereign debt crisis, there's the every time the Fed lowers interest rates after they've been raising them is when a recession happens. There's all of these weird things that it's kind of like I can't be like, oh, it's going to be this thing that's going to happen, but it's like I could tell you when, and it's probably going to be between again that April and May timeline, especially when we get Jupiter and Gemini. Various measures were taken, including financial assistance programs for countries like Greece to stabilize the Eurozone, hit Greece and their currencies. This is also happening 2012. This was, by the way, this is all in 2012. This is the last time we had Jupiter and Gemini. Introduction of the Euro banknote series. While not a new currency, the Eurozone introduced a new series of Euro banknotes in May of 2013, featuring updated security and features and a refreshed design. The design was unveiled in 2013, but the banknotes were introduced into circulation later. Thought that was interesting. We get to 2000. This is the time. So 2012 was the last time Jupiter was in Gemini, and then 2000, and then before that was 1988, and then before that was 1976, and then before that was / 1977, and then before that was like 1953, 1954. So 2000, we had the dot-com bubble burst. The summer of 2000 marked the bursting of the dot-com bubble. Many internet-based companies, which had seen their stock prices surge during the late 1990s, experienced a sharp decline. This event had implications for stock markets and investors' confidence. I thought that was interesting in terms of like Gemini, again, means of communication, .com, like all these websites coming online. Jupiter like came in and was like, hey, this is all inflated and fake. Because that's what I love about Jupiter. Like Jupiter rules truth, and it's in detriment in Gemini. Like, and I've talked a lot about like, oh yeah, it's in detriment, and people get really hung up on the word, but like that could be a good thing. In fact, there's a whole nother thing to talk about with that. Number one, also Jupiter was in Gemini between 2000 and 2001. It left Gemini pretty much right before 9/11. And we had the Enron scandal. The Enron scandal unfolded in 2001, revealing significant corporate fraud and accounting irregularities. The collapse of Enron, a major energy company, led to losses for investors and raised questions about corporate governance and accounting practices. That was interesting to me. This was 1976. I got these, by the way, again, like I said, this is all over the place here. But in 1976/77, United States dollar depreciation. During the mid-1970s, the U.S. dollar experienced a period of depreciation. This was partly due to the continued effects of the collapse of the Bretton Woods system and the transition to a system of floating exchange rates. So this is something, again, S.J. Anderson talks about. Uranus and Gemini was the beginning of the Bretton Woods system, which, again, put America America's dollar backed essentially everything to stabilize, European currencies and pretty much all currencies. And we were on the gold standard, and then Nixon kind of came around, and everyone's taking their gold, and Nixon's like, "Oh, we're off the gold standard." And so right after that, we started seeing a lot of instability. And this is again just Jupiter and Gemini when Uranus was like Jupiter going through Gemini after Uranus had left Gemini. International Monetary Fund in 1976, gold auction. In 1976, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, which is a big, big, big deal, conducted a series of auctions to sell off a portion of its gold holdings. This market marked a shift away from the gold standard and reflected changes in the international monetary system. So again, more people going towards the fiat. Also in 1976 slash 77, sterling crisis. The United Kingdom faced a financial crisis in 1976, resulting in the country seeking assistance from the IMF. The crisis was driven by factors such as high inflation, fiscal challenges, and a weak currency. We also see the UK going through some things, and we have a lot to talk about the UK. 1976, creation of special drawing rights. In 1976, the IMF introduced the special drawing right as an international reserve asset. SDRs are a supplementary foreign exchange reserve asset that the member countries can use in transaction with each other in the IMF. So we see a lot of, again, like IMF stuff, like again, global currency, things like that. Also, this is 76, 77. International economic challenges. The mid-1970s were characterized by global economic challenges, including inflationary pressures, oil price shocks, and economic imbalances. These factors influence policy decisions and shape the economic landscape during this period. Also, we get to about 1965. I think this is when it was. Introduction of the Singapore dollar on April 7, 1965. The currency interchangeability agreement was signed between Malaysia and Singapore, allowing the Singapore dollar to be interchangeable at par with the Malaysian ringgit. However, this agreement did not last long as Singapore separated from Malaysia on August 9th, 1965. Subsequently, on June 12th, 1967, the Monetary Authority of Singapore issued its own currency, the Singapore dollar, marking the country's independence in monetary matters. So, creation of new money. Also, we get to 1967 here, Jupiter and Gemini, devaluation of the British pound. So again, 1976-77, we had a sterling crisis, but 1967, we have devaluation of the British pound. In November 1967, the British government devalued the pound sterling by 14.3%. This decision was made in response to economic challenges, including a trade deficit and speculative pressures on the pound. The devaluation aimed to make British exports more competitive. This is again in the 60s. Gold and foreign exchange reserves. The mid-1960s marked a period of concern about the depletion of gold and foreign exchange reserves in various countries. The United States in particular faced pressures on its gold reserves as the country experienced a trade deficit and the costs associated with the Vietnam War. Again, this is right after we got off the gold standard. This is when we're kind of, we got off the gold standard in 1971. And this was kind of, I believe this is when nations were starting to want to collect their gold that we were holding because they were back, because the dollar was backed by gold at that point. Also, currency reform. This is now, we're going to 1948 was Jupiter and Gemini. Currency reform in West Germany on June 20th, 1948. West Germany introduced a new currency, the Deutschmark. As part of the comprehensive economic reform, this reform aimed to stabilize the German economy and lay the foundations for the subsequent economic recovery. But wait, there's more Jupiter and Gemini. So there's kind of the finance money stuff that we had going on. I'm interested in that. But this is where we get to surveillance. Gemini has to do with surveillance stuff. We have the Patriot Act, Saturn, Jupiter in Gemini, or Saturn opposite Pluto in Gemini and Sag. And this was in 2012. Oh, my bad. This is in 2013, right before Jupiter left Gemini. Between June of 2012 and May 2013, one notable event was the revelation of extensive global surveillance programs by Edward Snowden, exposing mass data collection by intelligence agencies. This had significant implications for privacy and sparked debates about the balance between security and individual rights. Additionally, this period saw continued advancements in mobile technology and social media influencing how people communicate and share information. So, by the way, Edward Snowden's like a Gemini rising, Gemini stellium, and this was when Jupiter was on his ascendant, like he was revealing a truth or something like that. I thought this was really interesting. Like, again, truth revealed about communications and what is being surveilled there. Things that we also get with Jupiter and Gemini, this would be in 1976, is, like I said, Apple kind of ends up being a bigger deal. Apple Computer, now Apple Inc., was founded in 1976 by Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne. The release of the Apple I in 1976 and the Apple II in 1977 marked important milestones in the history of personal computing. These developments laid the groundwork for the widespread use of computers and contributed to the evolution of communication technology. Again, Jupiter and Gemini, expanding technology. Then we get to 2012 as well. So 1976 is when Apple was created. And then in 2012, Apple experienced the passing of its co-founder Steve Jobs in October. This was a significant event that had an emotional impact on the company and the whole tech industry as a whole. I made a video. It's one of my favorite videos I ever made, and it got no views. Is like I talked about the Apple what is it called? The glasses that they made, the Vision Pro. That is such a big deal for Saturn and Neptune, and I talk so much about it, and Apple is really on my bingo card between 2024, 2025, and 2026. Also, Disney's making a comeback, by the way. We'll talk a lot about that with Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. Like, again, I might have like 2 or 3 episodes about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but I find this next year to be a big year for Apple. Between 2024 and 2025, while Jupiter is in Gemini. Again, maybe, and maybe that's, what's his face retiring, Tim Cook. 1978, we get the United States enacted the Foreign Intelligence Service Act, which was a significant piece of legislation governing electronic surveillance and intelligence gathering activities. FISA was a response to concerns about government surveillance in the context of national security and intelligence operations. 1978, we have more of this intelligence, more of the spying stuff going on. So that leads us to, with Jupiter and Gemini, my main predictions are like snowed in, intelligence stuff. Jupiter and Gemini will trine Pluto and Sag, so Pluto and Aquarius. So again, spying, surveillance by the government, surveillance by the government, all of that kind of good stuff. That's what I really see with Jupiter and Gemini. With Pluto and Aquarius, again, maybe that's CBDC. Maybe again, people like Nikki Haley are like, there's no more anonymous things online. So I would just imagine that kind of has a shift. But let's talk about the Mars-Uranus conjunction. I got to wrap this up. I got a client soon. This is kind of one of the last things too. Actually, I might need to pause for just a second. All right, you guys didn't see that, but I took a quick pause. We have like 30 or 40 more slides to go, and I got to wrap this up because I got to go soon. But Mars-Uranus conjunctions. On July 15th, we have the Mars-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. This will also be somewhat of a big deal. A lot of this year is focused on Mars. So I'm not disappointed, but in 2022, the Nord Stream pipeline blew up, and it was when Mars was in Gemini, and I wanted it to be when Mars was conjoining Uranus and Taurus so bad because it lines up well with that, but it wasn't. But let's just go ahead and talk a little bit about, again, some past Mars-Uranus conjunctions and how that can kind of inform us as to what might be happening in the future with Mars-Uranus conjunctions. Actually, I'm going to do this little number. The thing I'm looking at with Mars-Uranus conjoining in Taurus is that it follows the Jupiter-Uranus in Taurus. So it's like whatever happens with Jupiter conjoining Uranus in Taurus, Mars-Uranus follows up with like a problem of some sort. But again, Mars is fights, conflicts, violence, separation, cutting, inflammation. Uranus is again innovation, technology, freedom, rebellion, instability, explosiveness. Some of the past transits we had a Mars-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. Was this one in Taurus, or let me show you guys the chart, because this was around when Uranus entered Taurus. It might have still been in Aries. Yeah, so this was a Mars-Uranus conjunction in Aries. So Brexit triggered on March 29th, 2017. British Prime Minister Theresa May triggered Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, formally beginning the process of the United Kingdom exit from European Union, commonly known as Brexit. Mars-Uranus, see you later. We are independent from the EU. We are separating ourselves. Fuck off. That was Mars-Uranus in Aries. Also Mars-Uranus in Aries. U.S. travel ban. In March 2017, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order temporarily banning travel to the United States from several predominantly Muslim countries. The order faced legal challenges and underwent revisions. This was the whole Muslim ban. I don't know how much of this was Mars-Uranus, to be honest with you guys. I do find it interesting, though, that it happened during that time. I don't know how much of the connection with Mars-Uranus this is, but this happened during that time, so I thought it was interesting. Also, March of 2017, London terror attacks. On March 22nd, 2017, a terrorist attack occurred near the Palace of Westminster in London. A vehicle was driven into pedestrians on Westminster Bridge, and a police officer was stabbed near the Parliament. The attacker was shot and killed. This is a whole other thing. Mars Uranus, again, violence, conflict, kind of being explosive. We see that. This is another thing I thought was really interesting for Mars Uranus. This is more of a positive thing, but global march for science on April 22nd, 2017, which is close to the time frame you mentioned. That's ChatGPT talking to me. The first global march for science took place in various cities worldwide. The marches advocated for the importance of science and evidence-based policymaking. So I thought like the March for Science for Mars Uranus was like, we're kind of like, standing up for science, and why aren't we doing more things science related? I thought that was interesting for, Mars will typically be fights. You can argue a march or a protest is in that category to varying degrees. And Uranus is going to be the very science planet. Now we get to 2018, 2019. Like I said, these dates, sometimes they go back and forth when it comes to like earlier or later. This was the first Mars Uranus. Actually, hold on. I need to double check this too. I think this actually might have been in this was also in Aries. So January/February of 20. Actually, this would have been just mostly February of 2019. We had a Mars Uranus conjunction again in Aries. This was the last one. U.S. government shutdown. The United States experienced a partial government shutdown that lasted for 35 days, beginning in late December 2018, extending to January 19. It was the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. I thought this was interesting. Again, this is one of the things too where I don't know how much I like that for Mars Uranus. Pretty much because this was also during that time, right, when the South Node entered Capricorn and Saturn was like right next to Pluto in Capricorn, which makes a little bit more sense for a government shutdown. Here's something we get with the Mars Uranus thing too. This was in 2019 as well. This was the beginning part of 2019 of the Venezuela crisis, which we have a lot of shit going on in Venezuela here soon. Political turmoil escalated in Venezuela with opposition leader Juan Guaido declaring himself interim president, challenging the legitimacy of President Nicolas Maduro's government. The crisis drew international attention and support for both sides. So Mars Uranus, like again, like I'm now the leader. I'm overthrowing you. Mars, like again, fights, conflicts. Uranus is like independence, freedom. And the other reason why this is important is there's another one here. I forgot what year it is, but is when Nicolas Maduro was elected or came into power. 2013. In 2013, this was the Mars Uranus conjunction in I think this was still in Aries. Yeah, this should have been still in Aries. And this was in early 20. Hold on, I gotta look at it. Yeah, this would have been around March, April. North Korea tensions in early 2013. North Korea, under leader Kim Jong-un, conducted nuclear tests and made threats against South Korea and the United States, leading to increased tensions in the region. So this was also when Jupiter was in Gemini, also a Mars-Uranus conjunction. The whole North Korea thing, it's very similar to Israel-Palestine, where there's these hot spots that kind of happen all over the place, and trying to connect it to one transit is, I find, very difficult. But I do find it interesting that throughout these timelines that we've been looking at, like with Mars-Saturn conjunctions and Mars-Uranus conjunctions, we see North Korea coming more into the picture. And again, North Korea is preparing for war right now, or at least that's what they're stating. Again, right? How truthful that is, I don't know. But given that, I think the world will see some form of a world war here in the next few years, I think is very telling. Okay, so this is going back to 2013, early 2013, Venezuelan presidential election in April 2013. Nicolas Maduro won the presidential election in Venezuela, succeeding Hugo Chavez, who passed away earlier in the year. That was also a Mars-Uranus conjunction. So that's what I thought was interesting, was we had a Mars-Uranus conjunction when Nicolas Maduro was voted in, and then a Mars-Uranus conjunction later on when Juan Guaido, I know I'm botching that name, challenged that. So I kind of wonder how much the Mars-Uranus conjunction brings up Venezuela, because Venezuela is right now making plans to invade like 2/3 of Guyana for whatever fucking reason. And that might involve Brazil as well, because in order to get to that part of Guyana, they have to go through Brazil. So there's some weird stuff going on in Venezuela. I don't know how much, and again, all of that's about oil stuff too. So how much of that ends up playing out, I don't know, but I figured I might as well talk about it since that comes up. Also, Mars-Uranus in Aries, the ricin letters incident. In April 2013, letters containing ricin, a toxic substance, were sent to public officials, including U.S. President Barack Obama and Senator Roger Wicker. A suspect was later arrested. Again, I find this Mars-Uranus is kind of like a like a battle. And now these were Mars Uranus conjunctions in Aries, which is much more like violent or much more aggressive, versus Mars Uranus and Taurus seems more instability, in my opinion, like breakdowns of things. 2011, this was also so in this 2011 timeline was not only a Jupiter Uranus conjunction and Uranus ingressing into Aries, but it was a Mars Uranus ingress into Aries on March 11th, 2011. I believe this is like literally the day Uranus entered Aries. Actually, we could double check that. Let's see. Let's go back to March 11th of 2011. Oh no. Oh, we're in April. Whoops. What am I doing? Oh, I'm in 2009. That's why I was like, this doesn't look right. There we go. This is what I'm looking for. Okay, March 11th. Yeah, March 11th, 2011. I think March 12th was when Uranus entered Aries. There you go. So Mars and Uranus were very close to each other. Now, you can argue with me that that wasn't a conjunction. Okay, fine. And that was more Uranus and Aries. But I did find that interesting that we had. That was also during a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on a long term, as well as Uranus ingressing into Aries, Mars-Uranus. We have the Fukushima incident, magnitude 9.0 earthquake. This is what's crazy is Japan had like a ton of earthquakes over the past few days. And part of me wonders if that's happening more and more. I mean, like, there's so many other explanations for that. It's not necessarily astrology related, like the whole poles flipping and gravity and sunspots and shit like that. But Fukushima, nuclear disaster, along with that, Uranus ingressing to Aries. April 6, 2009, this was also, again, a Mars-Uranus conjunction in Pisces. An earthquake with a magnitude of 6.3 struck Abruzzo region of central Italy, causing significant damage to the town of, I'm going to botch that, Lucia. Hundreds of people were killed and thousands were left homeless. On April 5th, 2009, North Korea launched a long-range rocket, drawing international criticism. The United States Security Council issued a statement condemning the launch. Again, more of like, I find it funny with North Korea and these Mars-Uranus conjunctions of like launching missiles. They're just like, ha, surprise, we're going to send a missile. Because that's like very Mars-Uranus. On April 8th, 2009, the Maersk, Alabama, a U.S. cargo ship, was hijacked by Somali pirates off the coast of Somalia. Captain Richard Phillips of the movie Captain Phillips was held hostage but later rescued by U.S. Navy SEALs. This was Mars-Uranus and Pisces, guys. Like the ocean, the sea. And you had like rebels like literally trying to like hijack this thing, and it became like a whole, you know, whether you want to call them terrorists or whatever. But I thought Mars-Uranus, like random trouble in the ocean, random trouble in the sea. That's another reason why the Mars-Saturn conjunction in Pisces is really interesting to me in terms of like ocean and like what events happen in water or what events happen related to like wars related to the ocean, that sort of a thing. Also in April of 2009, the H1N1 influenza virus, commonly known as swine flu, emerged as a global health concern. The WHO declared a public health emergency. Now, I know we just got done talking about Mars-Saturn conjunctions being disease, but what's really interesting about oh, actually, this is what I want to do. What's really interesting about this time was this was a Mars-Saturn opposition. If we go to April 2009, yeah. Oh my gosh, I'm about to sneeze. If you said bless you, thank you. It's so weird. Sometimes I'll get the like need to sneeze while I'm recording, and my body won't let me because I'm recording. But when we get to April of 2009, as you can see here, we got this Mars-Saturn opposition, which I thought was really interesting in terms of like, again, Mars-Saturn connections and disease outbreaks. So now we have Mars conjoining Jupiter. This is going to be our next thing. Like, again, my problem with the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Taurus in terms of like just predictions of it is like, well, I think it has more of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, to be honest with you. Because the last Mars-Uranus conjunction we had in Taurus was in the middle of 2022. And in the middle of 2022, we were still dealing with supply chain crisis, which was very Saturn in Aquarius squaring Uranus in Taurus. When Saturn in Aquarius squared Uranus in Taurus was when that cargo ship got stuck in the Suez Canal, and that really fucked things up. But this is the Mars-Jupiter conjunction, and this is pretty much like the last thing that we're going to go over. Again, Mars is fights, conflicts, violence, separation, cutting, and inflammation, and Jupiter is expansion, increase, prosperity, abundance, wealth, faith, hope, insight, belief. We get interesting blow-ups when Mars makes contact with Jupiter, and I believe it was a Mars in Aries squaring Jupiter in Capricorn is when that Beirut explosion happened in Lebanon, that like firework factory. I think that was a Mars square Jupiter. So not exactly the same, but Mars Jupiter contact. The last one that we had of May of 24th of 2022 was the Uvalde shooting. That was in Aries. That was a big deal. Like, that, don't get me wrong, I think all mass shootings are a big deal, but the fact that like they did not get this guy and he just shot up children like for like an hour or something like that, I thought was very compelling. And that was Mars, Jupiter, and Aries, like an explosion of violence, right? March 19, 2020, COVID surge. A little bit of a different story because, again, when you go back to March of 19th of 2019, this is when we get to like March 19th, 2020. I think I might have said 2019. This was so many things going on. This was Saturn conjoining Pluto. This was Jupiter conjoining Saturn. This was Mars conjoining Jupiter. But this is probably where we started to see a lot of the COVID surge, and it wasn't until the very end of March is when the lockdowns happened, and that's when Mars conjoined Saturn at 0 Aquarius. Also, January 13th, 2018, Mars conjoined Jupiter. This was interesting to me, was the Hawaiian missile false alarm. On January 13th, 2018, an emergency alert was mistakenly sent to residents of Hawaii, warning of an incoming ballistic missile. The alert was later confirmed to be a false alarm caused by human error. You want to look at that one? Let's look at January 13th, 2018. I believe that was the exact conjunction of Mars and Jupiter. Here we go. So here's Mars, Jupiter, and Scorpio. Let's fast forward to the 13th. So it was a little bit disconnected, but still. It was also like Venus squaring Uranus. But Mars, Jupiter, and we get a false missile thing. I find that to be interesting in terms of like panic. Oh my God, this big thing might happen. This big explosion thing might happen. Another thing that was interesting around this time was Larry Nassar sentencing. Former USA gymnastics team Dr. Larry Nassar, or Nassar, was sentenced up to 175 years in prison. Not long enough for sexual abuse. The case gained widespread attention and shed light on issues of abuse and reports. This happened at the same time as the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Scorpio, which Jupiter and Scorpio correlated a lot with the Me Too movement of like truth and justice around like hidden dark sexual things behind like closed doors. So I thought this was really interesting. I think this was a big highlight of that. So again, I should probably also oh shit, I fucked up something. Okay, we'll figure that out later. So the Mars-Jupiter conjunction happens on August 13th, 2024. And this also coincides with the Jupiter-Saturn square, which I didn't talk much about. Like, I don't have much on that because that's kind of like, again, a bigger picture thing. I'd rather have Jupiter go into Gemini first to be like, okay, this is what Jupiter square Saturn is going to be. That's a hard word. Umpqua community college shooting, October 1st, 2015. This is also a Mars-Jupiter conjunction. A mass shooting occurred at Umpqua Community College in Roseburg, Oregon. The shooter killed 9 people and injured several others before taking his own life. Again, some sort of a mass thing of violence. And the hard part is, too, let me just be clear. I think I said this before. There's a lot of different transits that correlate with mass shootings. And so it's not like, oh, Mars, Jupiter, there'll be a mass shooting. But there is a good chance of it. There's a few different, I think even when Mars was in Scorpio with Jupiter and Scorpio was the Pulse nightclub shooting, the one in Florida. That was also there. Actually, I might even talk about this. Israel-Palestine violence, October 2015. This was, again, that Mars-Jupiter conjunction. There was a surge in violence between Israelis and Palestinians in October 2015. While many incidents involved stabbing, shootings, and clashes rather than traditional mass shootings, the overall violence resulted in numerous casualties on both sides. So again, more Israel-Palestine stuff. And I kind of bring this up to kind of reiterate the fact that it's like, the reason I didn't call anything, like I thought with Venus, again, I couldn't find this video anywhere, and I talked about it somewhere. Even Parker remembers it. That Venus leaving shadow would possibly cause a war. My bingo card wasn't Palestine and Israel because it's like shit fucking happens all the fucking time. This would have been, oh gosh, what day was this? Of course, I didn't write down the day of this, but this was a Mars-Jupiter conjunction. Egyptian protests and political unrest. Massive protests took place in Egypt against the government led by President Mohamed Morsi on July 3rd. The Egyptian military ousted Morsi from power. So again, massive uprising, power, violence, Jupiter, expansion of that ended up actually leading to an ousting of a government. This one also interesting. This is August 2013. In fact, this might have been August of 2013 now that I'm thinking about it. But we have a chemical weapons attack in Syria on August 21st, 2013. A chemical weapons attack occurred in the suburbs of Damascus, Syria. The attack drew international condemnation, and there were discussions about potential military intervention in Syria. What was interesting to me is that this was in Cancer. And if I'm not mistaken, I found this a long time ago, and for my Saturn-Neptune conjunction series, I tried looking up again and I couldn't find it, but it was like the first commercial chemical production was like something along the lines of like a salt, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Cancer. I find Cancer to be very like, again, in Neptune, like potions, liquids, but chemical weapons, Mars, Jupiter in Cancer. Also in 2013, the Ghouta chemical attack. In August of 2013, a major chemical weapons attack took place in the Ghouta suburb of Damascus, Syria. This incident... Wait, was this the same thing? Oh, okay. Why did I put this twice? Maybe ChatGPT gave it to me twice. Also, August of 2013, Texas Fort Hood shooting on August 23rd, 2013. A shooting occurred at Fort Hood in Texas where a gunman killed 3 people and injured 16 others before taking his own life. Again, we have more of this kind of mass shooting stuff going on with Mars-Jupiter stuff too. That's the Mars-Jupiter conjunctions. I think with the Mars-Jupiter and Gemini, I think we'll see more, again, possibly a mass shooting, but I'm looking more at the tech surveillance space with Mars-Jupiter, to be honest with you. That's kind of a little bit more what I'm looking at. So for the rest of the year, this is where this kind of ends. Is for the rest of the year, it's the Mars, like the big things are the Mars in shadow / retrograde during the next election. I am not ready to talk about this. I think that I want to get my videos out about Saturn, Neptune in Aries, Pluto in Aquarius again, Uranus in Gemini again, the U.S. Civil War videos that I'm going to be making in order for this to make sense. Because in my opinion, I don't think this election is going to go well at all. I've been very clear about that, and I think most people are on board with that. But what I mean by that is I don't think there will really be an election. And I don't think that I think there will be a lot of kind of chaos after the election until 2025 when like everything changes. And so I didn't have much to talk about with this because the other thing too is the last 2 Mars retrogrades in Cancer and Leo were only in Cancer and Leo. Like I believe it was 2010. December of 2009 to like January of 2010 was when Mars retrograded in Leo. And then I think it was either 2007 was when Mars retrograded in Cancer back into Gemini. So I need to do a lot more research on this before I feel confident about what's going on here. So we're going to see. But this is where this video ends. Those were kind of just, and again, I know this was like a prediction video, but really I just wanted to go over like, okay, here's these major events happening. And while I do want to make predictions about them, I also want to use past events to kind of inform that. So I guess to kind of recap, it's like Mars, Pluto, and Aquarius. I think some sort of a cyber attack or some sort of, again, like mass shooting thing, which again, I think it's kind of almost low hanging fruit to like predict mass shooting things because they fucking happen all the time. But I do think it's interesting to look at like what planetary correlations happen with them. I do think the Mercury Saturn Cazimi, I do think aliens are going to come out around that time. Not that they'll reveal themselves, but like more info about the alien thing that's going on. Same thing with government military tech. Make sure you guys watch those videos. I'm going to link in the link below. I also think Eclipse in Aries with Mars Saturn war is going to break out again, possibly disease, some sort of a sickness, again, some sort of a disease. And if it's war or disease related, probably having to do with water, probably the ocean will be involved at some point in a bigger, way. And then, again, maybe it's like the Houthis like actually like destroy like a Navy destroyer or like a Navy battleship or something like that. let's see here. And then it was Jupiter and Gemini. I think more revelations about the tech surveillance. Jupiter and Gemini trining Pluto is, I mean, again, also to recession stuff. Because I don't know if you noticed, every Jupiter and Gemini was like fallouts with money. So some sort of a recession will probably hit during that time. Because again, everyone's excited about the Fed lowering interest rates, but like time and time again, after a period of increasing interest rates, when they fall, that's when the recession actually kicks in. So I wouldn't be surprised about that. Jupiter, though, trining Pluto, I just think, again, surveillance, tech state stuff being rolled out. Jupiter, Uranus, again, too, also innovation with food, kind of the beta rollout of CBDC. Wouldn't be surprised if it was Europe first. Jupiter, and then Mars, Uranus is, again, probably something to do with North Korea. We see that too many times. Possibly something to do with a follow-up of the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, and then Mars-Jupiter is going to be some sort of like mass shooting. Again, I almost wonder if it's like something to do with the tech stuff too. But again, I'm going to assume a majority of you did not get to the end of this video, but I do want to say these are a little doom and gloom, but I don't think that's something to like worry about. It's not like, oh my God, there's going to be all these bad things. It's like the chances of you being a victim of this, unless there's a cyber attack, that's kind of a whole different story. But I just don't see, I look at this as like, let's just look at the world. Let's look at the context. Let's look at these past events and see what we can connect. And, you know, when I'm looking at major events that happen in these timeframes, these are the things that come up. Oh, and a plane crash with Mars Saturn. A very notable plane crash. So that's pretty much what I think I have to say. And again, I want to know what you guys think is going to happen in 2024, given everything that we've talked about. So let me know in the comments below. And like I said before, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave me a review on Apple or Spotify. It does help me out. And with that being said, I love and appreciate you guys. I'll be seeing you guys for another episode here very soon.